Darren Jones, who is the Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury, is with us this morning. Hi, it's good to see you. Thanks for joining us on the programme. Would Labour call for a ceasefire in Gaza at the moment?
Well, look, of course we want the fighting to end. No one with any sense of common humanity would look at the images coming out of Gaza or indeed Israel and want that to continue. But the fact of the matter is that there are still, I think, hundreds of Israeli hostages being kept by Hamas in Gaza, and Hamas continues to attack Israel. And the quickest thing that could be done to get to a position of peace would be for Hamas to release those hostages and to stop attacking Israel. But clearly, that terrorist organisation, Hamas, does not have the interests of the Palestinian people at heart either. So
is Labour calling for a ceasefire? Temporary ceasefire?
Well, all I'm saying is that the quickest way to get to that would be for those hostages to be released. No, I'm answering it because those hostages have not been released, have they? Hostages have not been released, and Hamas continues to attack Israel. That's why Israel...
And in the meantime, civilians are being killed left, right and centre.
I understand, and nobody...
And a ceasefire would stop that.
Of course.
So why don't you call for one?
Well, because it's entirely understandable for Israel to want to continue to try to get those hostages back from Hamas terrorists and to try to stop Hamas from attacking Israel, which is happening on an ongoing basis. Nobody wants to see these scenes unfolding in Gaza. Nobody wants to see civilians, children, women, people, all types of people being affected by this.
Wouldn't a pause allow for clearer heads?
Sorry, say that
Wouldn't
again.
a pause allow for clearer heads?
Well, I'm sure that it would, but you have to understand Israel's position. I think if, Britain had British hostages being held by terrorists, we would want to recover them, and we wouldn't stop from our efforts of trying to recover them. So you empathise with Israel in wanting to be able to do that. And the quickest route
UN Secretary-General doesn't.
Well, look, the UN Secretary-General is calling for peace as well, and I think, it's not for me to speak on behalf of the Secretary-General, but I think all of us would say that Hamas needs to return those hostages to Israel and stop attacking Israel so that we can get to a position of peace and back to a political dialogue.
Comfortable with his comments overnight, not least the Palestinian people have been subjected to 56 years of suffocating occupation. 1,400 murders did not happen in a vacuum, he said.
Look, I'm never going to provide any justification for a terror organisation unleashing terrorist attacks on any country. But what I would say is that, of course, this is an extremely sensitive and emotive issue, rightly and understandably, for people on the Palestinian side and the Israeli side.
So did he overstep, do you think?
Well, it's not for me to mark the UN Secretary-General's homework.
No, but you're allowed to have an opinion.
I am, but look, as a Labour politician, we hope to come into government next year. There are proper ways of doing these things. I'm sure British diplomats at the UN will be talking to the Secretary-General on behalf of the British government. It's not for me to provide an alternative running commentary in news interviews.
Well, what's your response to his language?
It's up to the Secretary-General to decide what language he wants to use. The whole basis of the UN is that you try to bring countries together to get to points of resolution and compromise and peace. He's clearly taken a decision to use the lines that he's used, and he's now going to have to talk to his partners at the UN about that and how best the UN can support getting to a position of peace. But it's, as I say, it's not for me to, mark the Secretary-General's homework.
Clear violations of humanitarian law in Gaza. Does Labour agree with that?
Well, again, you don't want to see water, food, energy being turned off in Gaza. It has horrific consequences for people in Gaza. The hospital that was bombed, we think from the intelligence confirmed by the British government and the Americans, that came from a rocket coming out of Gaza. These are not the scenes that you should be seeing in any war. Hospitals should be protected. Energy, water, food should be made available to innocent civilians, and you want to get to a position where that is the case. But it's not for me to make any judgment on what is or isn't a war crime. We have international courts, a judicial system that has to consider those issues properly, and I'm sure that they will be considered in due course.
We've heard from Save the Children as well, and they've made a direct appeal to the Prime Minister to demand a ceasefire now. So are they misstepping as well?
I've not said anyone's misstepped, Kay, and I'm not saying Save the Children
I'm not quite sure what you are saying. Should there be a ceasefire or not?
Well, to answer your question about Save the Children, again, I entirely empathise with their position. I watched the news last night of children being affected by this, and, it's clearly deeply sad, and you don't want any child to be in that situation. And I understand, therefore, why they are calling for that. All I'm saying to you is that on issues of ceasefire or other issues, there are proper diplomatic routes that need to be followed for those types of discussions to happen. It's not for MPs such as myself in TV interviews.
No, it's not just you're representing Labour today, so
But let me answer that question as well, though, Kay, because the Labour Party is a party preparing for government. We hope that we might be in government next year. So what I say today could have implications for what a Labour government might have to do. No, but that's why I'm being very limited in what I'm saying to you today, because if we are to come into government next year, it will be for David Lammy, our Foreign Secretary, for our diplomatic service to have conversations in a proper and professional way. And politicians can say things very easily or share things on social media or in news studios that can have implications for that type of process. And all I'm saying is that I'm going to be handling this situation in a professional way.
So Gutierrez is not being proper and professional at the moment, then?
Well, that's a different question, and that's not what I said.
It is a different question.
Yeah. And I'm saying that for the United Nations, which is not the British government, Labour's not going to be running the United Nations, that's a decision for the Secretary-General, and it's a decision he's clearly taken.
OK. You wanted to talk about Rishi Sunak today, first anniversary. I mean, he steadied the ship. We had 3 prime ministers in what felt like at the brink of an eye. He's been there a year now. You can say what you like. I mean, he could be in power for another year.
He could. I mean, I suppose it's good that we've had a Prime Minister for more than, 49 days at a time. If that's stability, then that's welcome. But I'm pretty sure that if you ask the British people in any part of the country, do they feel like Rishi Sunak has got a control of his party and of the government and therefore the country, they would say no. Of the 5 missions that Rishi Sunak announced, he's not been making any progress really against any of them. To celebrate his first birthday as Prime Minister, he didn't block the change in bankers' bonuses so that bonuses can now be as high as they want to be in the banking sector. It just looks, I think, to the British people that Rishi Sunak doesn't have the right priorities. And when they thought maybe a year ago, compared to Liz Truss and Boris Johnson, he might be a guy that, is going to work hard and steady the ship and solve problems, actually, he's really not solving problems and delivering the change the country needs.
How confident are you being in power next year?
Well, we're very happy in the Labour Party about, the recent by-election wins and our polling position, but we are in no way complacent about the next election.
Does it feel like a 92 or a 97 moment?
You have to forgive me, Kay. I think I was 6 in 1992.
Oh, ouch!
So I don't know. But all I would say is that we're working really, really hard to speak to voters right across the country, whether in Scotland, in towns and cities in England, or in rural communities, as we were in mid-Bedfordshire and Selby in the last few months, to try to win the trust of the British people. And we're going to keep working really, really hard to do that.
You know what happened in 92, right?
No, I do. I've read history.
In 97?
Well, I remember that. I was 12. And,
okay. I can do that.
I was pretty excited about that. And it transformed my life, which is why I'm so much looking forward to a Labour government. The national minimum wage transformed my family situation. The gifted and talented programme meant that I was the first in my family to go to university, and a whole host of other things. A Labour government can really change the lives of people, and I'm looking forward to
You'd rehearsed that, hadn't you? It's good to see you. Thanks so much, Lee, for joining us. Really appreciate it.